We're out there in YouTube land. Dan here from GeekCast Radio doing another Marvel Fresh Start review as I go through all the Marvel Fresh Start titles and answer two key questions. Number one, is it any good? And number two, is it in fact a fresh start? In this video, I will be discussing Thor #1, written by Jason Aaron with art by Mike Del Mundo and Christian Ward. Yes, there are two stories in this, both of which tie into Thor and what will be kind of the last act of Jason Aaron's run on this character. And I usually answer the question of how good it is first, but it seems more fitting to actually get into the, is this in fact a fresh start? And as expected, the answer is not really at all. It's the least of all the fresh starts so far, but what's not broke, why fix it, right? But if you've never read a Thor book, if you've never read a Thor book from Jason Aaron, going into this, there are a lot of things that it ties into that doesn't really go that deep into it. It gives you an understanding of where this book is and kind of what will be the arc of this next piece of Jason Aaron's puzzle with Thor, but it talks about things like the war with the realms with Malekith, which it doesn't get into in great detail. Doesn't really explain all that much why Thor wasn't worthy, why what Loki did, like the status quo. It gets you up to understanding of what all the status quo is, but the hows and the whys it isn't really super got into, but it makes sense because if it did, you're talking about years of books. But I will say is, if you're reading this, you may not know all the different pieces. You may not know all the small, minute details of what brought us here. But understanding where this is going, I think, is easy enough to follow. Really, what this is setting the stage for what will be this next arc. We see Thor going around the galaxy collecting different magical pieces that were escaped or were broken free of Asgard after what happened to it at the end of Mighty Thor. He's going around trying to collect them to safeguard them once again, and that becomes a very big challenge. And we also learn that even though Thor is here with all of his hammers, he's not quite the Thor of old as of yet. He's not quite as powerful as he once was, and he has a lot of major challenges right away of what he has to get into. I don't want to spoil who he catches up with, who he goes toe to toe with, but as a fan of that character, it was like, oh, that's one of those moments where you just, I'm not big into the who can win in a fight, but there are moments like that in a comic book where it's like, I love seeing two characters who don't normally intertwine all that much actually go toe to toe, and it actually makes sense because that character does have a magical background, so of course it would tie into this storyline. The other piece in the backup story is the future Thor, the one that's eons from now, the Thor that looks like his father Odin. And we see that things are becoming even more complicated there. There's some dire straits that occur. And I'll just say the last page of this, it just made it clear that Marvel is very much in the mold of, we're just going to let things happen. We're going to let loose. We have Cosmic Ghost Rider, and then this is like, okay, Jason Aaron saw what Donny Cates did, and it's like, I'm going to up the stage even more. Sure, you can have Frank Castle as Ghost Rider. Well, guess what? I take that. I see your challenge, and now I'm going to try to top you going with what I like. So I'm really curious to see where that goes. Based upon that, won't be actually touched upon for a few issues. But like I said, it depends what type of reader you are, depending upon how much of a fresh start this is. If you've been reading Thor and liking Thor, you'll enjoy this. If you're coming in and wondering, can I jump on board and just kind of hit the ground running, I think you can. It all depends upon, like, if you're a person that needs to know all the minute details, you may be kind of scratching your head of like, okay, what is that about? What is that about? But the bulk of the story, really what it's going after, is pretty easy to comprehend. Now, the quality of the book. I thought the quality of the book, of course, is good. Jason Aaron's been doing this book for some time. I've been loving what he's done. I actually thought the Mighty Thor piece, Jane Foster's Thor, worked for me so well. I was a little worried that I wouldn't like Thor as much as a character. There was just more weight as Jane Foster as Thor because she had the duality of her being a human suffering from this disease, having cancer, but also wanting to be this hero, needing to be this hero, and how to affect her. It humanizes the powers of Thor in that way. But with this Thor, he's just normal Thor. However, I think what Jason Aaron is doing is realizing you can't just go from Jane Foster to Thor being Thor. You need to let Thor earn his God of Thunder title once again, and that's what's really happening here. He's not as powerful. He's still kind of using his intellect and things of that nature a little bit more than normal. I do really enjoy this art by Mundo. It's a little more cartoony than I would expect, but I love the color palette. A lot of reds and greens and yellows really pop off the page throughout. Although it's not what I typically expect for a Jason Aaron Thor run. And I gotta say, I do like actually feel like the Christian Ward art in the back fits into the tone of the typical Jason Aaron book a lot more. However, what I really noticed about the voice of Jason Aaron had for Thor in this was it's a lot more comedic than I remembered. And I don't know if it's because I'm more cognizant of the fact that we just had Thor Ragnarok. So anytime Thor has a joke or there's more of a humorous scene, it stands out more. But Thor has a line in this like, I'm the worst Thor. And it doesn't feel like a line I would associate with Thor in Jason Aaron's run previously. Like it's Thor God of Thunder. I couldn't imagine that line popping out. But in this opening story, it's a lot more energetic. It's a lot more high octane. And I think, in a way, the color palette doesn't, in fact, kind of tie into something like Thor Ragnarok. It is bright and, out there. And I don't know if that was a conscious choice or it was just, something that they really weren't thinking of. I'm guessing it might be something ultimately. But I did have a lot of fun with it. And I do think that Jason Aaron is, again, setting up something really special. The War of the Realms piece has been in the background for some time, and now it seems that's going to be on the forefront. I'm curious if this idea of Thor going around trying to collect all these little artifacts could get a little tiresome quickly, although based upon the ending of the first arc, it seems like that maybe just be a red herring, and that is not what this is going to be focusing on. I don't want to give anything away, but it seems like Thor may be going headfirst into this war that he's been on the outside of because the Bifrost being down and unable to really help all the different realms. And it has that similar energy, and a lot of great guest stars in this. As I mentioned, a lot of people pop up. I gotta say, I love Thorgy. The guy, Thor's dog. Anytime he shows up, I'm a fan, and I like the cast of characters that will be kind of the focal point for the next issue. I wanted to see how all those intertwine and how all those work together. So, if you're a person that was curious about this, wanted to get into Thor, I do think there's a lot here to enjoy. Is it as high a level as Mighty Thor was for me? Not yet, but for me, Jason Aaron's always been a writer that it gets better as it goes. Like he does a good first issue, but he's not someone like a Brian K. Vaughan that will kind of put everything out in the first issue and you're just amazed and it goes from there. It's really more character based. Although, like I said, this does have a lot of surprise moments, especially that last page. That's like, okay, that's a great cliffhanger to end on. Can't wait for that to happen. Unfortunately, based upon where the indication on the bottom of the page, we won't be seeing that for some time. But so ultimately, I gotta say, I've been really liking what Marvel's been doing. If people were wanting more of a fresh take on Thor, this isn't it. But at least we do have Thor being Thor again, so there is one of that benefit. We get to see that journey. We get to see Thor kind of become who he was once more. This has been a tale that's been building for years now for Jason Aaron, and he's just, I think, getting into the final leg of it. So I don't know how long this will last, if it will last as long as the Mighty Thor. It has the potential to, because you're talking about a war that is, through different worlds and dimensions and things like that, that has left even like, actual refugees. And it seems like that might be a piece it focuses on. There was actually gods from other worlds that are now forced to live in kind of general confines. So a little bit of a social commentary there, but not really the huge focal point. Ultimately, it's a lot of fun with a lot of great story. And Jason Aaron continues to be one of the best writers for Marvel. And this Thor run continues to be one of the best books. So that's pretty much the sum of it. As I indicated, I'm doing all of these reviews. I will probably stick with many of these, the ones that I feel like are worthy of going through, worthy, no pun intended, and having reviews of the second and third issues, just as much as I feel like I have something to talk about. But if you want to listen and hear more from me, check out my podcast, Comic Concierge. Subscribe to this channel, as we'll have plenty of videos to go through. I do comic hauls, I do must-read comics, some comic thoughts on graphic novels, try to run the gamut of talking about all different types of comics. So, but that's it for me. Remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching.